What's going on, my friends? This is Neil Adler with another episode of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. It is Thursday. Almost forgot. The day after Wednesday. Okay, we got that settled. This is Syracuse Central. We talk about Syracuse football, basketball, and recruiting in both sports. If you are so inclined, please hit that subscribe button. And as always, drop me comments about what you want to see and don't want to see, and what you like and what you absolutely despise. All right, so we're going to do Syracuse football recruiting today because yesterday, Wednesday, was the start of the early signing period for 2026 high school football prospects. And so it runs from Wednesday to Friday, and then the traditional National Signing Day period, whatever, is early February. And I guess the easiest way to put it is that there was definitely a couple of things of note, um, but I will just start out with some positivity here. Let's just leave it at that, okay? So, um, prior to like a week or two ago, Syracuse had 30 verbal commits in this class. And then three guys decommitted, which I'm pretty sure I talked about on Syracuse Central. And I was kind of getting the impression that they were told their scholarships were no longer available. So anyway, and then Stephen Picard, who is a lineman, offensive lineman. Gosh, I should know that. Yeah, offensive lineman, 3-star offensive lineman. Originally from New York, and he flipped from Syracuse to Florida State. He goes to the IMG Academy. Wish him well. That brought it down to 26. And then on Wednesday, on National Sign, the first day of the early signing period, 3-star athlete / quarterback Tyrell Grant Jr., who plays high school football in Virginia, flipped from Syracuse to Virginia Tech 2 days after he said he was locked in with Syracuse. It is what it is. Virginia Tech's got a new head coach, James Franklin, who is obviously a successful head coach, and Virginia Tech is a home school or a local school, in-state school for Grant. So look, wish him well. And then Syracuse did pick up a commitment from a 3-star JUCO wide receiver who played at Glendale Community College in California, Zamondre Merriweather, and 24/7 Sports composite rankings of junior college players in this class. He was top 20 overall, and I think number 3 at wide receiver. So he had looks like, I'm just looking through my stuff here. I think he had like 59 catches for 961 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns this past season for Glendale Community College. So, and then beyond that, so that's 30, 26, 25, 26. So they have 26, but one of them didn't sign. And we'll get into that, and you already know about it, and we'll get into that in the second segment. But so right now they have 26, assuming Calvin Russell signs. And they're ranked just inside the top 30 according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. And look, putting aside Calvin Russell, it's a really nice class. You know, all the 4-stars. There was multiple guys that are 4-stars by at least one recruiting service. Amari Guff, the wide receiver from Richmond, Virginia. Alexander Haskell, who flipped from Penn State earlier this fall. He's a 4-star defensive lineman, St. Joe's Prep in Philly. Tadarius Hughes, who goes to Miami Northwestern Senior High School. He's a 4-star defensive back, flipped from Florida State to Syracuse. Jarius Rogers, who's a 4-star edge rusher. Cameron Wilson is also a 4-star edge rusher. And Wilson goes to Miami Southridge, and Jarius Rogers goes to Fleming Island. Both are in Florida. And then the other 4-star, again, according to at least one recruiting service, is Javion Cooper, who plays at Melbourne Central Catholic in Florida, and he's an offensive tackle. So, I've talked about some of these guys before. And look, again, putting Calvin Russell to the side, Syracuse lost one guy, and the guy that flipped, it was, they obviously lost Picard and some other guys, but there wasn't a lot of drama other than Calvin Russell. And all the 4-star guys stayed locked in. And it's like I said, it's trending depending on what Calvin does as a top 30 national class, which in the modern era of when recruiting rankings were, really starting to get going, like on the internet, whether it's, through Rivals or ESPN or 24/7 Sports or whatever, the last 20 25 years or something like that. I feel like it was the early 2000s. This would be the high, I believe, would be the highest ranked class for Syracuse ever in that modern era, so to speak. So, what else do you say? Congrats. That's great. And we'll see what they do in the portal. And they've got a lot of key guys coming back. And it's just a really nice class. So, there some of those 4-star guys, Cameron Wilson, Jarius Rogers, Cooper, I think even Guff, like they had other suitors. They took other visits. And obviously Hughes flipped from Florida State to Syracuse. So if they hang on to Calvin Russell, and the only guy they lost during the early period was Tyrell Grant, and then obviously those other 4 guys, including Picard. Look, I mean, you never want to lose guys, but that's a net win, in my opinion. So speaking of that, so obviously the big bombshell on Wednesday, and I didn't know about it ahead of time. I will be fully transparent when I have intel, insider information, or whatever you want to call it, versus obviously not knowing, and I did not know about this ahead of time. But I did kind of feel like it wouldn't surprise me if something came down. So Calvin Russell, there was like a signing ceremony for Miami Northwestern senior high school guys. Calvin Russell's a 2026 5-star receiver. And other guys, were doing their signings of their financial, agreements, whatever, including to Darius Hughes, who plays at Miami Northwestern and is, flipped from Florida State to Syracuse. And so Calvin gets up there and says he's not signing. And look, we'll see what happens, and I wish him well no matter what, even if he flips to another school, and he's got to do what's best for him. I didn't really like that approach, just because, as someone who's been a journalist, who's been in PR, who's been in, I don't know, it just kind of like it took it away from these other kids. Like if you didn't want to sign on Wednesday and you're gonna wait till Friday and you're still thinking things over, that's okay, but like don't do it in the middle of the ceremony. Like go just put it on social media before or after. I don't know. I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. So, in any event, so Russell's, and there was a bunch of articles, and his agent also put something out, and talk about how he's committed and loves Fran Brown, but he's just not sure because he's got to make sure it's the best thing for him, and blah blah blah. I mean, there was one article where he was quoted as saying, here, I want to read this. It was from Marcus Benjamin, who's an analyst at Rivals. So here it is. Here's the quote. Just thinking, is this really where I want to be? ? Is it, obviously talking about Syracuse, is it the best opportunity? Is this where I want to call home for the next 3 to 4 years? Other schools have been coming at me for the last 2 days, and I want to weigh out my options. I'm just trying to see if it's a place that I really want to call home. It's still a great relationship with him, i.e. Fran Brown, and the whole coaching staff. And he also said, when I feel better about the decision, I'll just make the decision. I mean, look, I talked to a source on Wednesday. I texted with a source, and that source said to me that the Syracuse staff is still confident. Fran Brown touched on it too, without obviously naming Calvin directly, because he can't talk about a prep recruit until they've signed by name. But I don't know, like, his Final Four in early July when he picked Syracuse, it was Syracuse, Florida State, Michigan, and Oregon. And then, he took a bunch of game day visits to Miami, which is a hometown school. One of his best friends plays for the Hurricanes. Okay. And then some of the schools that are like being floated out there, and I'm getting like mixed signals from different like national reporters versus recruiting analysts about what schools are reaching out to Calvin and are serious. But those 3 I just mentioned, Miami, Florida State, Florida, also Michigan, and I also saw LSU. So who freaking knows? I mean, who knows? And who knows if it's about, money, and obviously rev share comes in as well as third-party NIL. I can't imagine his relationship with Fran Brown isn't still awesome. I think it is. Certainly the team, Syracuse, didn't play well this year. Then again, neither did Florida State or Florida. Florida has a new head coach. LSU has a new head coach. Florida's, what's the other school? Michigan was, is pretty solid. Miami, might get into the playoff. They probably are on the outside looking in, but they've had a good year. I don't know. Like, just pick the school. Like, whatever. Like, I know, like, he's a top 25 national prospect according to 24/7 Sports. He's 5 stars. He's 4 stars, high 4 stars elsewhere. He's a really good prospect. And I know with these highly rated recruits, whether it's in football or basketball, there might be more like quote unquote drama or whatever. Like, I don't want to call him a prima donna because like he's a kid. And he's just doing, but it's like, dude, just make up your mind. And look, Syracuse has flipped guys from other schools to Syracuse. Other guys have flipped from Syracuse to other schools during the signing period, whether it's the early signing period or whatever. So I mean, it happens. It's just like this. Calvin would be the highest ranked recruit for Syracuse or commit in more than 2 decades, and the class is still good regardless. But it would take some of the wind out of the sails, so to speak, if he flipped elsewhere. And also the other thing for me that's frustrating is if he ultimately does flip, and I have no idea if he's going to, nor if he does where he's going. It's like he's maintained all fall that he's locked in with Syracuse and his recruitment is over, and then it's like in the last few days, what people are like blowing him up, like, is it money? Because what else would it be? And I'm not. And look, if he's taking a bigger payday, good for him. Like, who am I to say anything? Dude's gonna make more money than I make, so like whatever. It would kind of stink a little bit if he ended up going elsewhere after all the song and dance in the fall and analysts constantly calling him a flip target and me getting on Syracuse Central saying that's BS. And then if he did flip, but we'll see. It is what it is, and I wish him well no matter what, and hopefully they can hang on to him. All right, so Fran Brown had a press conference regarding the National Signing Day. The early signing period. It's not National Signing Day, early signing period. And I didn't listen live, but I definitely listened in, later on. And he was asked about Calvin Russell, and he can't talk about him again by name. But let me just read some of the stuff he said. He said things like, it's the nature of the business. It's where we are right now. When he was asked about Calvin Russell's delay, a lot of things can happen, different pieces. I have complete confidence. I'm really good at recruiting, and he is. I'm also great at building relationships. I got faith in that block S. I got faith in the S. We got to sprint through the finish line. We'll be fine. And he talked about how he was like up late, into Wednesday morning when the early signing period began, and talking about this and that, and, other guys being, other Syracuse guys getting courted by other schools and this and that. And it's just, look, and he was asked about if he thought Calvin Russell not signing on Wednesday had anything to do with money or involved money, or it was because Syracuse wasn't good on offense or just wasn't good this year. He said it could be a mixture of everything. And then he said, I know we have a good relationship. There's genuine love from me, genuine love from him. I'm confident in who I am. I'm confident in the block S and what we're building here. Just got to have confidence, right? Look, he said all the right things. And look, I think Fran Brown's a good human being. He's got character. He's all about integrity. He holds people accountable. He's very direct and honest and real from my perspective. And I'm not like friends with him. But just based on, being a media member covering the team. And he's got confidence in his recruiting, and he's shown that he's a good recruiter. What else is he supposed to say, though? Like, he can't get into, talking about him directly because he's not a signed prospect. It's a verbal pledge. But he's like, yeah, we'll get it done. I'm confident in myself. Good, he should be. And if it is money and Syracuse can't match it or doesn't want to match it or whatever, then good for Calvin Russell, go get paid. If it's something else, and he flips somewhere else, and it's not because of money, I'd love to know what that is, just to know. And let me tell you, on Friday, assuming he announces on Friday, and it's not Syracuse, oh my God, the Syracuse fan base is going to figuratively explode, whether it's in chat rooms or on social media. I'll obviously be checking it out for Inside the Loud House. It's going to be nuts. Anyway, I'm glad that he's confident. Fran Brown's confident about his recruiting chops because he's shown it. They need to do better on the field this year. I truly don't think that if Calvin Russell flipped, it was because Syracuse stunk this year, because there's a lot of factors why they stunk, quarterback and otherwise, and I just think next year is a different year. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Obviously, drop me comments. And some of y'all were commenting on my last show, which aired on Wednesday, which was about basketball, but some of y'all were asking about Calvin. So we chatted about that a little bit. But drop me comments when the show airs on Thursday. I think it's around 11 a.m. Do you think Calvin Russell is going to stay committed to Syracuse? And if so, why? If not, why? And where do you think he's headed? Because I have no clue. And I just have no clue. So anyway, the last thing I wanted to talk about, because I had done basketball the last couple of days, was Fran Brown made some coaching changes. And so he got guys that weren't retained included special teams coordinator Ricky Brumfield, offensive line coach Dale Williams, defensive backs coach Joe Schaefer, and co-defensive coordinator / linebackers coach Robert Wright. And that was on top of in early November when first-year wide receivers coach / passing game coordinator Miles White was no longer with the program, and Josh Gaddis, who's a quality control offensive specialist, would be taking over as wide receivers coach. Meanwhile, Nunzio Campanelli went from coaching quarterbacks to tight ends, and co-offensive coordinator Michael Johnson went from coaching tight ends to coaching quarterbacks. So, and then the other big thing is that Elijah Robinson, who is the team's defensive coordinator and is dear friends with Fran Brown from when they grew up in Camden, New Jersey, he's got a new role with the team as a co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. And, what that ultimately is going to mean is that Fran Brown's going to bring in a different defensive coordinator who's going to actually handle play calling duties. And so, look, a lot of people, were talk. The news came out and there was talk about changes and, some articles about it earlier in the week before the official announcement from SU Athletics, and some fans were like, "Oh God." But is Robinson going to hold his job just because he's friends with Fran? No. I mean, he's still with the staff, but he got demoted. I mean, what else is there to say? And Fran, talked about that some, and he talked about Elijah Robinson. He said he's really good at coaching the D line. He's a great defensive line coach, and then he'll help out with assistant head coaching things. But then they got to get like another defensive coordinator in there to do play calling. And, we'll see who that is. I'll be curious who that is. And one thing Fran Brown said at his presser on Wednesday, following National Signing Day, was he talked about, I didn't think we have an identity on defense. And he talked about the lack of effective tackling and something like that. I mean, I thought the team was not good on offense either. Obviously, Steve Angeli had a lot to do with that, but the offensive line was not good. The running game was kind of like so-so. But I guess the bottom line for me is it always kind of stinks, when people lose their jobs, because a lot of them have families and kids and stuff. You don't wish that, but at the same time, this is a business, and so it's funny though. Some people on social media, like on the Inside the Loud House social media, are talking about how Fran Brown should get fired too. But it's like, dude, he had a 10-3 season and then a 3-9 season where their quarterback, who's leading the country in passing yards, got knocked out of the season after 4 games. They had a tough schedule. They had a young roster, a lot of other things. And yeah, ultimately the buck stops with Fran Brown, but you can't fire him after 2 years. Not when they went 10-3. Come on. And they just hauled in this class. Let's see what they do in the portal from early to mid-January. But the bottom line is I wish all the coaches who weren't retained well. I didn't think special teams was awful this year, but I mean, Jack Stonehouse, congrats to him. He was named All-ACC first team as the redshirt senior punter earlier this week. I didn't think special teams was like amazing, but I didn't think it was awful. The kicking game there wasn't a lot of it going on, but definitely a lot of issues on both offense and defense. And so, again, wish these coaches well. And the fact that Elijah Robinson was demoted, I think, was the right move. But I'm fine with Fran Brown keeping him on staff, and we'll see who they bring in as the defensive coordinator and also to fill these other roles and how they do in the portal. And, I still think the future looks bright. So let me know what you think about those changes at the assistant coaching level. And that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. I'm your host, Neil Adler. As always, drop me comments about what you like and you don't like. Please hit that subscribe button if you feel so inclined. Tell all your friends. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I will talk to you again on Friday. It's Friday. What's everyone up to this weekend? Hopefully something fun. All right. Thanks again, friends. You take care.